Hi guys, it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel and this is my June wrap up. Alright, so I'm very sorry if you can hear the rain. I sat down to film and then it just decided to chuck it down with rain as always, so it's very dark and it's a little bit noisy. Hopefully my mic doesn't pick it up too much. But anyway, my June wrap up. This video is a little bit later than normal because I've just had a very busy start to the month of July and I just haven't had the time to sit down and film. But we're here, we're doing it now, and I'm very excited to share my reading achievements with you all in June. I read a lot of fantastic books last month and I haven't been able to decide what my favourite book of June is because I just had quite a lot of 4 and 5-star reads. But before we get into all of the books that I read, we're going to do the stats. So I read a total of 9 books in June, which is pretty good going. I read every single book that was on my TBR and 1 extra book, so I'm pretty impressed with myself considering I was working a lot in June. I read 2,906 pages and my average rating was 4.13 stars, which again is a pretty high rating. And that's just because, like I said, I read so many fantastic books in June and I had a lot of 4 and 5-star reads. And then in terms of formats, I read 4 physical books, 4 ebooks, and then 1 audiobook. So, oh my gosh. It is so loud. But anyway, as always, I'm going to start with my lowest rated books and then work my way up to the highest rated. And I only had 2 3-star books this month. And one of the first ones is The Ghosts We Keep by Mason Deaver. So this is a book all about a non-binary character called Liam, and Liam is struggling with the death of their brother. Their brother was killed in a car accident, and so they're dealing with that while also dealing with trying to connect with their brother's best friend. And what I really liked about this book the most was that it wasn't a coming out story, which is the case with the majority of the books that I read. And honestly, there is nothing wrong with coming out stories. Those stories are really important. They should be told and people need to read them. But what I loved about Liam was that they were already established as a non-binary gay character, and their family was very accepting of that, which was really nice. And it was more just about them dealing with the loss of their brother and negotiating friendships and things like that while also dealing with school. And we kind of see their relationship with their brother in the past, little snippets of it. And to be honest, I would have liked a lot more of that. I did feel quite disconnected to this story, and I would have liked a little bit more depth into the 2 siblings' relationship, and how they got on and the things that they did before the brother died. And yeah, this book was okay. Like, it wasn't for me personally, but I could definitely see the merits in it. I just didn't quite connect with it. I didn't quite get the emotional impact that I was hoping I would get. But I will say that this book is partly inspired by the fact that Mason Deaver lost their father a few years ago, and it's kind of their response to that in a different way, and just kind of them, being able to put their emotions down on paper. So knowing that, I kind of understand the book a little bit more and I kind of feel something for the book a little bit more. But this book wasn't for me, unfortunately, but you might enjoy it. My next 3-star read of June was The Deathless Girls by Kieran Millward Hargrave. So this is actually a reread for me. I didn't finish this book last year. I read it during the start of the first lockdown, and I was really struggling to focus on anything other than what the fuck is going to happen to my job, and how am I going to cope with all of this. So I didn't read a lot during that period last year, and I did try to read this and I did almost finish it, but it just got to the point where I wasn't feeling it, I wasn't enjoying it, and so I just had to stop. However, I picked it up on a whim at the end of June, and I ended up liking it. I didn't love it. This was a book that I was very excited for when it first came out a few years ago, because it is inspired by Dracula's Brides. So this is kind of like an origin story, I guess, of Dracula's brides and where they might have come from. But it just didn't have enough vampiric detail, vampiric elements for me personally. I did really like the writing in this book. I thought it was so beautiful. I don't normally like flowery writing in genres like this, but I think it was just the right amount of floweriness. There wasn't too much, but it was enough to just create this really nice, really dark and brooding atmosphere. There was something very foreboding about it in the writing, which just really appealed to me. I really liked the main character. I thought she was a very well-rounded, well-written female character, and this book does focus very heavily on feminist aspects within the society that these characters live in. It kind of discusses a little bit about how women are treated, especially traveller girls, and some of it was quite harrowing, but yeah, this book it was okay. Like, I enjoyed it. It's good for what it is, but it just didn't have enough of the spookiness and the vampire things going on for me to absolutely love it. But it's definitely a really good read for October time if you're looking for something a little bit different and something a little bit brooding and vampire light, and it does also have a really lovely sapphic romance in the story as well, so I would still encourage people to read it. It just wasn't the best book for me. Alright, so now we're going to move on to my 4-star reads, and one of the first books that I read and gave 4 stars was Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. So this is a book that recently came out, and I've heard absolutely incredible things about it, and it was definitely worth the read. This is a very interesting twist on the Cinderella fairy tale that we all know and love, but this follows Sophia, and she lives in a world where society doesn't treat women very well, and that aspect of this book made me very angry and frustrated, and I felt so many things when reading those scenes. And they basically live in a world where there are these rules that men and women have to adhere to, particularly women, and every year young girls have to go to a ball where they will get picked by a man, a wealthy man, and they are forced to marry that man and live with them for the rest of their lives. But if you don't get chosen, you are pretty much forfeit, and you are sent off to the castle to be a slave or whatever. And yeah, like, there are a lot of layers to this book, and the twists and turns in this I was not expecting. I was living for it. It was just so well written. The reveal at the end just absolutely gobsmacked me because, yeah, I didn't see it coming at all. This isn't a book that I would have normally picked for myself, but after having read it, I'm really intrigued to read more books within this young adult dark fantasy genre, because this one really did a lot of things for me. I would have liked a little bit more depth into the world that Sophia was living in, and I would have liked a little bit more kind of detail into her background and things like that. I did feel like we didn't get enough of it. But, you know, that's just a very minor criticism on my part. And I still really recommend that people read this. I love the sapphic romance in this book as well, because Sophia is a lesbian and she's pretty comfortable with that fact. She's pretty adamant that she's not going to marry a man. And she's kind of the person that kind of dismantles this world. Am I spoiling it? I don't know. I'm not going to say anymore. Please go and read this if you haven't. I know the author has a new book out called The Poison Heart, I think, which is a Alice in Wonderland inspired story retelling. And I feel like I might have to go and pick that one up soon because this one was just so good. My next 4-star read is We Have Always Been Here, a queer Muslim memoir by Samra Habib. So this was a book that I read in pretty much one sitting. It was such an easy and quick read, and it was also really informative. So this book talks about Samra Habib's life as a girl growing up in Pakistan and then in Canada when her parents immigrated over there, and she discusses a lot of things surrounding how women are treated within certain Muslim circles, which made for a very emotional and very harrowing read sometimes. And I'm not saying that every Muslim man treats Muslim women in this way. They definitely don't. It is a very small minority, but it is a very eye-opening realization that these things are happening within the Muslim community, not just in the Muslim community, but in every community. But yeah, this one was just really eye-opening, and I learned a lot of things about Muslim culture that I probably wouldn't have known about if I hadn't read this book, both good and bad things. And then this book also talks about as she gets older and how she discovers her sexuality, how she goes off to Japan where she meets a lot of queer people like her, and it kind of opens up her eyes to what it's like to be a queer person, and how she also discovers that you can be Muslim and queer when she meets other queer Muslims. Samra Habib is actually a photographer, and she has done a project about being Muslim and queer, which I did look at because I am very interested in photography, and I think her pictures are absolutely stunning, and it was just a really interesting look into a different side of the Muslim community that we perhaps wouldn't know about, because being queer and being Muslim are two things that are very stigmatized at the moment within the Muslim community, and queer Muslims do get persecuted for it quite a lot at the moment, which obviously needs to change, but this book definitely discusses that in quite a lot of detail. I just feel like this book ended very abruptly, which is why I ended up giving it 4 stars, because I feel like there should have been more. I mean, obviously, again, that's a very minor criticism on my part, because the author obviously is only going to reveal whatever she is comfortable with revealing, but it just ended very suddenly, and I was left feeling a little bit, I wouldn't say underwhelmed, but I was definitely like, oh, is that it? I thought there was more. But I was really interested in the first half of this book, where she talks about her childhood and what it was like for her growing up. I really liked that aspect, and even though I'm not a queer Muslim, there were some things that I could relate to a little bit, and I think every child could. So this was a very, very informative read, and like I said, a really quick and easy read. I definitely encourage people to pick it up if you're interested in learning more about the Muslim community, about being a queer Muslim, about feminism, about political issues. There is a lot of layers to this book, and I just really, really liked this one. And then my last 4-star read is Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett. So this is a book that follows a young girl, Simone. She's a young black girl and she has just started a new school. She is HIV positive, and at her last school people found out, which is why she had to move schools, because there is a lot of stigma surrounding HIV and positive people, and this is something that was very, very different to other things that I have read within young adult contemporary novels. This book, for a start, was very, very informative, and it teaches you a lot about HIV as a disease and how HIV positive people live with it and the things that they have to deal with in terms of like stigmatization and treatments and stuff like that. And from previous experiences, I have looked into HIV a lot in the past, so I wouldn't say I'm 100% clued up on it, because I'm not, but I do know a little bit more about HIV than the average person, I would say, because there are a few people that I have had to kind of educate on that subject a little bit, because there's so much misunderstanding surrounding HIV and AIDS, and a lot of that is to do with everything that happened back in the 80s when a lot of members of the gay community were contracting HIV, and it became kind of like the gay disease, and that kind of fueled a lot of the stigmatization and a lot of homophobia as well surrounding this disease. So yeah, anyway, when I was reading this, like, I could really tell that the author had done her research into HIV. And so for that alone, this book is very educational and you will learn a lot of things about HIV. I think it does a very good job of dismantling the stigma around it and showing people that you can live a very normal, happy, healthy life with HIV if you do all of the right things. But this also talks a lot about sexuality and sex in general. This book is very, very sex positive, which is another thing that really, really impressed me with this book, because I don't see that a lot in not just young adult fiction, but in adult fiction as well. I don't see a lot of sex positivity, but this book talks a lot about female sexuality and female masturbation and things like that in a very nuanced way. You know, it's not there's no beating around the bush with it. It's just straight up honest and informative, and it just lets you know that those things are okay. It's okay to explore your body. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to explore and figure things out. And I loved that aspect to it. And then the main character, Simone, is bisexual, and there are some parts in the book where she is trying to figure out whether she is bisexual or not, what it means to be bisexual, and yeah, it was just really, really interesting. The only thing that I didn't like about this book, and again, it's another minor criticism, it's just a personal preference, was the musical aspect to this book. This book has a musical in it. They're practicing for a play, and I really don't like musicals. I'm not a huge fan, and there were a lot of references to musicals in here that I didn't understand, and it just kind of grated on me a little bit. And yeah, like, I didn't know it was about a musical, or there was a musical in it, I should say, to start with, but that's a very small criticism, and it is pretty irrelevant. This book is absolutely amazing. Go and read it. Alright, so now we're on to my 5-star reads, and I have 4, I think. Do I have 4? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, I have 4. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This book was perfect. I can't find a single fault wrong with this book. It is everything that people said it is. So this book follows a trans guy called Yadriel, who wants to be a Brujo, but he's not been given the opportunity to become a Brujo, and he's kind of been, I wouldn't say he's been pushed aside by his community as such, but they haven't allowed him to become a Brujo because of the fact that he is trans. So he goes off with his friend Maritza to perform the ceremony that will make him become a Brujo. And it works. So yay, he is what he wants to be. But this happens because a member of his family is killed. And in order to find that person's body, they want to summon his ghost so they can find out what happened to him. But instead, what actually happens is that Yadriel summons the ghost of a boy, the school's resident bad boy, which I can't remember his name, Julian, there we go, Julian Diaz. And he was one of the most delightfully annoying characters I have ever read, and he's probably one of my new favourite characters. I was in love with him platonically because he was just so much fun on the page. Oh my gosh, like everything that came out of his mouth was hilarious. And I loved just seeing the relationship between Julian and Yadriel develop over time. And it was just so much fun to see these antics going on where Yadriel is trying to find out what happened to Julian and also Yadriel's cousin, while Yadriel is there and no one else can see him. So Yadriel is like talking to Julian and everyone else is like, who the fuck is he talking to? That kind of thing. It was just so funny. But I also really loved everything about the Day of the Dead, which is the Latinx celebration of the dead that usually happens around Halloween time. I really enjoyed that. It isn't something that I've read in a book yet, and it just added this great atmosphere, this great party atmosphere, and the way Aidan Thomas was talking about all of the food, the Spanish food, oh my gosh, it was making me so hungry. Just the descriptions of it all was just making my mouth water. I was loving this book. It did take me a while to get through it, but, you know, it was great, and the twist at the end paid off really well. Like, it was so worth the wait to see what was actually going on. I loved it so much. I can't wait to read the other book that Aidan Thomas has written. I just think that he has a lot of potential to be a really great writer within the young adult genre, maybe in the adult genre as well, I don't know, but this book was just everything that people said it was, and it was one of my 5-star predictions, and it didn't let me down. My next 5-star read is Ace by Angela Shen. So this is a book all about asexuality, and I listened to the audiobook for this, and it was so fascinating. And this book doesn't just talk about asexuality, it also talks about sexuality in general, how there is a lot of pressure within society for people to have sex, for people to be in relationships, and it also talks a lot about feminism and how women are expected to be a certain way, and how asexual women are treated differently compared to asexual men. There was just a lot of really important discussions within this book that it's very hard to talk about it in just a very short video. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about asexuality in general, but also about aromanticism, demisexuality, what it's like to be asexual and lesbian, or asexual and gay, trans asexuals, disabled asexuals, you know. It also talks about race and asexuality. There was just so much going on, And I feel like I need to listen to it again because I know there is a lot of stuff that I probably didn't pick up on the first time round. But one of the things that really, really interested me actually, and I think is something that we could probably talk about a bit more within the book community, is how asexual characters are represented in literature, and how a lot of literature is centered around romance, and you know, romantic relationships and sexual relationships, and how a lot of books that don't feature those kind of relationships aren't as popular. It was just a really, really interesting discussion, and something that I haven't really thought about myself, but yeah, like, I totally understand where Angela Chen is coming from. There are also really, really interesting parts about people who are asexual, who were discovering that they were asexual. The fact that asexuality was considered to be something, you know, to do with illness and things like that. It was just really, really interesting. So I really recommend this book if you want to read up more on asexuality, because it's not really something that I understand myself, but it's also something that society doesn't understand, and I think, you know, when you read this book, it's going to open your eyes up to a lot of really important discussions and make you think about things in a very different way. Next we have Hani and Issues, A Guide to Fake Dating by Adiba Jaigadar. So this book is a very big contender for my favourite book of the year. I wasn't expecting to love this book as much as I did, but wow, blew me away. If I could give it 10 stars, I would. There was not a single thing wrong with this book. I mean, I could say that the only thing wrong with it was that it was too short. I would have loved more, but I do believe the author is writing a sequel about a road trip with these two characters. I need to go and check that, but that sounds pretty interesting and I would definitely read it. This book follows Hani and Issue. So Hani is bisexual, but her friends don't believe that she is bisexual. And Issue isn't very popular in school, but she wants to be head girl. Hani is quite popular, so in order for Issue to become popular and get votes to be head girl, Issue agrees to fake date Hani, because then Hani can also convince her friends that she is bisexual, because she blurts out, "Oh, I have a girlfriend," and it's Issue. So obviously that is gonna set the story up for a lot of really fun antics, and I just had such a great time reading this book. I read it so quickly and I just loved both of the girls so much. I want them to be my best friends. They had such great personalities. They both had very different personalities, but they worked really well together. You know, they were like the yin and yang of each other, and it was just such a delight to see their interactions and their relationship develop. I just loved everything within this book. I love the discussions that it had about race and sexuality, and about being Bangladeshi and bisexual, and the relationship that both girls had with their families was really interesting to read about. And again, there was so many layers in this book, and there's so much that I want to talk about, but it's going to spoil it for you. So all I can really say is please read this book, because it will make you feel so many things. It made me happy, it made me sad at times, it made me laugh, it made me in love, you know, like I really, 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 really enjoyed this book. I definitely want to read The Henna Wars by this author as well. I know that book came out first. This book was just incredible. The writing was fantastic. It's also set in Ireland, and I loved that. And there were just so many moments in this book that stand out in my head, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. Alright, we're nearly there, guys. My last book of June, my last 5-star book, and another book that is a very big contender for my favourite book of the year, and it's between this one and Hani an Issue for my favourite book of June, but I really can't decide. But that is The Minders by John Mars. Wow. Like, I have no words for this book. John Mars has failed to disappoint me. Every book that I have read of his so far has been absolutely outstanding. And this one was just, like, I don't even know what to say about this book, but it was wild. There was so much going on, and the plot was just so intriguing. It really sucked me in from the get-go. So this book is about these 5 people who become what the government has dubbed minders. So the government has basically chosen them to have all of the UK's security information, all of this sensitive info implanted into their DNA in their brains, as a way to kind of protect it from terrorism. And these people have to go off and live entirely different lives. They change their names, they can't see their families anymore, you know, they have to just not exist pretty much for 5 years and just keep moving around the country so that people can't find this information. And there were so many twists and turns in this book that it was just very hard to keep up sometimes. And again, every chapter was left on a cliffhanger, so it was very difficult to put this book down because you just have to keep reading to find out what's going on. And what actually happened was just, I didn't see it coming. I thought I knew where this book was going. I thought I knew what was going to happen. I thought I knew who the antagonist was. And I was wrong. Pleasantly, I was wrong. I really love John Mars so much. He's definitely one of my new favourite authors, one of my new favourite thriller writers. Every time I read one of his books, it is a roller coaster, and this one was no exception. I don't think it was as good as The Passengers. The Passengers is still probably my favourite book by John Mars, but this is a very close second. I will just say as well, if you haven't read The Passengers or The One, don't read this book because it does spoil some of the plots for both of those books. It spoils The Passengers more. But yeah, just be very mindful of that. But I really love the fact that he has included plot points and things from his other books, because it makes the world that he writes in so much more complex and so much more rich and real. And yeah, like, I'm so excited to read another one of his books. I do have What Lies Between Us on my Kindle, so hopefully I can get to that one soon. But this book was just phenomenal. Go and read it. Alright guys, those are all the books that I read in June. It's a very long video, so if you've got to the end, then thank you so much for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. Please let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books that I've talked about and what you thought of them, whether you agree with me or not. As always, I love to hear your opinions. I am gonna wrap this video up here. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a cheeky thumbs up if you like this video, and please subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos from me in the future, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye guys.